Stephanie White, you are a joke.
Stephanie White forcing Caitlin Clark to learn a new system.
This is ridiculous.
You know, it's a different group. While system might still be very similar, it's a different group.
Indiana Fever unfortunately hired a snake oil saleswoman.
Stephanie White is going to be exposed as a fraud as a coach.
That's not good.
Stephanie White just said the quiet part out loud. Caitlin Clark is no longer the system. For the first time since her historic debut, the Fever's head coach publicly confirmed what fans have feared. The team is no longer built around its generational star. The fallout was immediate. Fans erupted. Commentators flinched. And Clark? She looks exhausted, uninspired, and boxed in. But this isn't just about exes. An Ostis is about power, legacy, and the identity of an entire franchise. When you sideline the very force that made you relevant, what's left? A crisis is brewing in Indiana, and it starts at the top.
That's not good to hear.
You can't come in here and try to change Caitlin Clark, the person. They don't want Caitlin Clark to do Caitlin Clark no more.
When Caitlin Clark was selected as the #1 overall pick by the Indiana Fever, it wasn't just a basketball move, it was a cultural event. She wasn't brought in to be a cog in an existing machine. She was the machine. From day one, Caitlin wasn't just a draft pick, she was the franchise blueprint. She represented a fresh start, a new era, and the kind of lightning in a bottle talent that only comes around once in a generation. The Fever didn't just select her. They hit the marketing switch, sold season tickets, and began rebranding their identity around her electrifying style of play. The Fever's front office made one thing clear to fans. This team would be fast, modern, and built around Caitlin's skill set. A franchise long mired in irrelevance was now front-page news, riding the momentum of the most talked-about college athlete in years. She brought flair, confidence, and vision to a league hungry for attention, and the Indiana Fever promised to let her play her game. And for a while, that promise looked very real. Clark led the team in assists. She broke viewership records across ESPN and local markets. When she was on the court, arenas were packed. When she touched the ball, energy surged through the building. People didn't just show up to see the Fever, they showed up to see Caitlin Clark unleashed. At Iowa, she was the system. Pick and rolls at breakneck speed, deep threes in transition, no-look dimes slicing defenses apart. That style translated instantly to the WNBA, with Clark logging multiple double-doubles and proving that her style of play wasn't a gimmick, it was a revolution. Early interviews with head coach Stephanie White echoed that sentiment. She praised Clark's pace, her leadership, her vision. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. This was Clark's team, and everyone else would fall into place. But then something changed. The freedom that once defined the Fever's offense started to disappear. The quick trigger threes, the fast breaks, the pick and rolls were replaced by slower, more rigid sets. Clark was no longer orchestrating from the top of the key, she was often standing in the corner, waiting. Stephanie White's tone shifted subtly in press conferences. The narrative moved from "we're building around Caitlin" to "we're teaching her how to play within the system." Only problem? She was the system. This slow unraveling has left fans confused and frustrated. How did we go from Clark as the centerpiece to Clark being asked to defer? Why take the Ferrari out of the garage only to drive it like a minivan? The truth is, the Indiana Fever sold a dream and Caitlin Clark was the blueprint. But when the execution started to drift from that vision, the entire foundation began to crack. And if this blueprint is ignored, what's left isn't just bad basketball, it's a betrayal of everything fans were promised. But that's just the beginning.
Stephanie White speaking about Caitlin Clark actually learning this new system. And me personally, I feel like she's forcing Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA like a Ferrari, rolling off the assembly, line polished, powerful, and made to move. She wasn't built to idle in traffic. She was born to fly down open lanes, pull up from 30 feet without blinking, and dictate the rhythm of every game with her instinctive brilliance. But under Stephanie White's coaching philosophy, that Ferrari has been downshifted into first gear, and it's not just disappointing, it's downright infuriating. Instead of unleashing Clark to do what she does best, create, attack, Lead White has structured her into passivity. Gone are the fast breaks and full-court reads. Gone is the improvisational magic that made Clark a generational phenomenon. In its place is a rigid, outdated half-court offense that forces Clark into the role of a spot-up shooter, a background character in a story that was supposed to revolve around her. This isn't a knock on structure itself. Every team needs some kind of system. But what's happening in Indiana isn't structure, it's suppression. And the proof is written all over the floor. Possessions drag. Spacing collapses. Tempo dies. You'll often see Clark standing near the wing while Natasha Howard slowly walks the ball up the court. Plays unfold like molasses, with Clark touching the ball for one pass, then disappearing from the sequence altogether. At Iowa, Caitlin Clark was the system. She operated in organized chaos, pushing the pace, firing from deep, running pick and rolls with machine-like precision, and creating offense out of thin air. It wasn't just fun to watch. It was effective. Her presence alone shifted defenses, opening up looks for every teammate on the floor. The rhythm of her game was instinctual, fast, reactive, and it worked because she had the freedom to read the court in real time. Now, that freedom is gone. She's being told to fit in instead of stand out. It's like asking Steph Curry to run floppy sets from the corner instead of pulling from the logo or creating off the dribble. You don't clip the wings of a bird and then wonder why it's not flying. You don't tell Patrick Mahomes to hand the ball off every play. So why is Caitlin Clark being coached like she's an ordinary rookie? The results speak for themselves. The Fever offense stagnates. Leads slip away. Fourth quarters turn into nightmares. And perhaps most telling of all, Clark's energy, the swagger, the spark is fading. She still delivers flashes of brilliance, but the electricity that once jolted the team alive is flickering. This isn't about development, it's about identity. You don't draft a generational point guard, sell the public on a revolution, and then try to turn her into a glorified catch-and-shoot decoy. What we're witnessing isn't evolution, it's erosion. And unless something changes fast, this Ferrari won't just be stuck in first gear. It might break down entirely. And the worst part? Everyone saw it coming.
Fans is not happy with everything that has been transpiring with Caitlin Clark.
We are stuck watching an elementary school offense because Stephanie White is in over her head.
In sports, some quotes live forever and not in a good way. Stephanie White just delivered one of those quotes. In a post-game interview that rippled across social media and fan forums like a digital earthquake, White said the quiet part out loud. Clark's not the system anymore. Just like that, the Indiana Fever's head coach confirmed what fans had been dreading for weeks, and it sparked a wildfire of criticism. That quote wasn't just a coaching update, it was a confession, a pivot, and according to many fans, a betrayal. Caitlin Clark was the system. She was the identity. From the moment she was drafted, the entire vision of the Indiana Fever was built around her unique, high-octane style of play. Her quick-trigger threes, her dazzling assists, her ability to pull defenders out to the parking lot tall of it was supposed to define this new era of Fever basketball. But now, that blueprint has been torn in half mid-season. White's comment made one thing painfully clear. This isn't Clark's team anymore, not in philosophy, not in structure, and certainly not in execution. And the shift hasn't just been theoretical, it's showing up in the stats and in the on-court product. Clark's minutes have been carefully managed. Her touches have decreased. And most alarming of all, the pace has slowed to a crawl. This is a player who thrived in chaos, who set the college world on fire by running a symphony of motion and reaction. At Iowa, the offense ran through her, not around her. And yet, in Indiana, she's being asked to adapt to an antiquated, methodical system that barely resembles the free-flowing rhythm that made her famous. White's regime isn't just sidelining Clark, it's dulling the very instincts that made her a generational star. You can see the consequences in her performance and in her body language. She looks less energized, less aggressive, less her. The joy that once defined her game, the emotional spark that pulled in record viewerships and packed arenas is fading. She's still delivering quality basketball, but it's coming in fragments instead of full-on explosions. And that's not a reflection of Clark's talent, it's a reflection of her environment. Fans noticed it long before White admitted it. Comment sections, post-game reactions, and even national broadcasts began to point out how different Clark looked not just physically, but emotionally. When a player who once beamed with confidence starts looking disconnected on the bench or disengaged on the court, something's off. And now we know what it is. She's being systemically minimized in a system that was supposed to elevate her. Stephanie White may have thought she was offering strategic insight. Instead, she handed fans a reason to revolt. Because the second Clark stopped being the system, the Fever stopped being a team with a future and started looking like a franchise in denial. And if they don't course correct soon, they may lose more than just games. They may lose the very soul of what they promised to build.
Caitlin Clark, plasters over all the cracks. She realistically plasters over all the cracks of this team. This team is not structured well.
The Indiana Fever promised a rebuild. What they've delivered is a regression dressed up in modern branding. And now, as the season unfolds, the cracks in the foundation are turning into craters. Double-digit leads, gone in the fourth quarter, ball movement, stalled, offensive identity, lost in translation. This isn't the future of the WNBA, it's a rerun from 2010, and the fans know it. You don't have to look deep into the stat sheets to see it. The Fever have now blown multiple double-digit leads, often within a single quarter. Games that started with pace, excitement, and energy suddenly freeze in the fourth. Possessions slow to a crawl. The shot clock bleeds down. And the team, once looking poised, suddenly appears disjointed, like they're guessing instead of executing. That's not just poor conditioning or bad luck. That's a systemic failure, and it starts with the coach. Stephanie White's offensive system, praised in the preseason for its structure and discipline, has become a cage. It's suffocating players who thrive on instinct, especially Caitlin Clark. Her natural tempo is fast, intuitive, and improvisational, perfect for today's game. But in White's rigid half-court setup, Clark's gifts become liabilities. She's forced to overthink instead of react. She's waiting for plays to develop instead of creating them. And when a generational playmaker has to suppress their instincts just to fit, you've already lost. The result? A team that's slower, less creative, and ultimately less dangerous. And it's not just Clark who's affected. The entire roster seems stuck between two visions. On one hand, there's the Caitlin Clark era Fever, young, explosive, ready to redefine how the WNBA plays. On the other, there's Stephanie White's philosophy, methodical, deliberate, reliant on outdated sets and veteran post-ups. It's a mismatch that's creating more than just bad basketball. It's creating confusion. On the court, players hesitate. Off the court, the chemistry feels off. Even locker room interviews have begun to reflect subtle signs of frustration and disconnect. This isn't a team playing with confidence, it's a team playing not to make mistakes. Meanwhile, fans are feeling duped. This isn't what they were sold. They were told to expect innovation, a changing of the guard. Clark's arrival was hyped as the dawn of a new era, a movement toward a faster, more exciting brand of play. But what they're watching is painfully familiar. Isolation sets, stagnant movement, and missed opportunities in crunch time. It's as if someone dusted off a playbook from a decade ago and forced a Ferrari to drive it like a minivan. People didn't show up to arenas across the country to watch Clark stand in the corner. They didn't set viewership records to see her used as a decoy. This isn't evolution, it's sabotage. If Indiana was truly rebuilding, they'd be building around their star. Instead, they're dragging her into a system that doesn't work for her, and frankly, doesn't work for the modern game. And until that changes, every blown lead, every missed opportunity, and every lifeless fourth quarter will only deepen the divide between what was promised and what's being delivered. When a coach publicly describes her team as living on different islands, it's more than a passing comment, it's a warning flare. Stephanie White's own words suggest what many fans have started to sense. The Indiana Fever locker room isn't united, it's fractured. And that fracture is growing wider by the game, especially as the gap between Caitlin Clark and the rest of the roster becomes harder to ignore. At the core of this disconnect is a simple, painful truth. This team was not built for Clark. She may be the face on the billboards, the name on the jerseys, and the spark behind the ticket sales, but the players around her weren't selected to complement her strengths. They're remnants of a different system, holdovers from a pre-Clark era. And now, instead of reshaping the roster to elevate the generational talent they drafted, the Fever are forcing Clark to adjust to pieces that simply don't fit. Take Victoria Vivians, for instance, see a volume shooter who lacks the consistency and spacing needed to open the floor for Clark's drives and dime. Natasha Howard, a veteran with a championship past, plays with a deliberate pace that clashes with the quick decision-making and tempo Caitlin thrives on. And then there's Sydney Colson, more known for her off-court presence and viral moments than her on-court production. While each of these players may bring something to the table, they don't bring what Clark needs. Instead of a team designed to run the floor, space the court, and read on the fly, Clark is surrounded by mismatched skill sets and out-of-sync tendencies. It's like drafting a franchise quarterback, then giving them a receiving core that doesn't run routes. The result? Missed timing, stalled possessions, and a young star who looks more isolated with every game. And it's not just tactical, it's cultural. Clark came into the league with swagger, vision, and leadership instincts. But in this locker room dynamic, that leadership is being neutralized. There's a visible reluctance to hand her the keys. Instead of empowering her voice, the team dynamic feels like it's silencing it. The offense doesn't run through her. Her intensity isn't echoed by her teammates. And worse, when she gets knocked down literally and emotionally, very few are there to lift her up. Compare this to championship-caliber organizations. Look at how stars are supported, both on and off the court. They're surrounded by complementary players, a coaching staff that adapts to them, and a locker room culture that unites around their leadership. The Fever? They're asking Clark to be the sun in a solar system that's still orbiting the wrong planet. This isn't just a personnel issue, it's an identity crisis. Clark is a generational talent trapped in a team that doesn't yet understand what it has. And every quote about different islands only confirms what's playing out on the court. A disjointed roster, a divided culture, and a franchise that still doesn't know how to rally behind its star. If Indiana doesn't realign soon, they won't just lose games, they'll lose the locker room. And potentially, their centerpiece too. There was a time when Caitlin Clark played like her heart was on fire. Every fast break, every logo three, every no-look dime was fueled by more than talent, it was joy. It was a swagger you couldn't teach, and a confidence you couldn't fake. You saw it in her grin after a deep shot, in her swagger after a big assist, and in the way she electrified entire arenas just by being herself. But lately, that joy is fading, and fans have noticed. Scroll through social media and it's all over the comments. She doesn't look happy anymore. Something's off. Where's the fire? Even seasoned analysts have quietly noted the change. It's not just her stats that are dipping, it's her spirit. That magnetic energy that used to bounce off the court is being dulled, game by game. And that's not just bad news for Indiana, it's a red flag for the entire WNBA. The problem isn't just minutes or touches, its identity. Caitlin Clark was never just a shooter, or a passer, or a scorer. She was a show, a creator, a leader who danced on the edge of chaos and made brilliance look effortless. She played with improvisation, imagination, and instinct. But now, the system she's being asked to follow is sucking that out of her. The rigid half-court sets, the glacial pace, the slow-motion decision-making, all of it is anti-Caitlin. This isn't teaching her the league. This isn't development. This is dismantling. They're coaching the instincts out of her, and in doing so, they're flattening everything that made her different. There's a real danger here, not just in terms of wins and losses, but in what it's doing to her emotionally. Because burnout isn't just physical, it's creative, it's mental. It's waking up and realizing the game that once set your soul on fire now feels like a job. It's knowing you can take over, but being told to stay in your lane. That kind of weight breaks players, not just their bodies, but their belief. And let's be clear, this isn't just about one star. This is about what happens when a franchise tries to mold greatness into a shape that fits their outdated blueprint. You don't draft Caitlin Clark to conform her. You draft her to build around her, to unleash her, to empower her. Because if you don't, if you keep silencing her style, her spark, her soul, you don't just lose her production, you lose the player. It's already starting to show. Less interaction with fans, less emotion on the court, more visible frustration. The excitement that once radiated from every possession is fading fast. And the blame doesn't fall on her, it falls on the system that refuses to adapt. So when fans say, this doesn't look like Caitlin anymore, they're not wrong. The version we're watching now is restrained, muted, and exhausted. Not because she can't carry the load, but because she's being forced to carry it the wrong way. The joy is fading, and if Indiana doesn't change course, they might lose more than just their season. They might lose the very magic they were supposed to protect. The most frustrating part of watching the Indiana Fever isn't just the losses, it's the contrast. Because every so often, for a few glorious minutes, you see it. Caitlin Clark grabs a rebound, pushes the pace, zips a pass to the corner, or drills a transition three. The offense flows. The court opens up. The team looks energized, like they finally remember what it's like to play with urgency. But just as quickly as it appears, that fire dies. And every time, it's the same culprit. The coaching leash snaps tight, pulling Clark and the entire team back into a crawl. This isn't a mystery anymore, it's a pattern. When Clark is allowed to freelance, when she plays with pace, aggression, and instinct, the Fever look like a real team. The ball moves, the defense scrambles. Role players thrive in the chaos she creates. But as soon as Stephanie White imposes her structured, outdated offense, the life drains out. The pace slows to a slog. The shot clock winds down without a purpose. Players stand still, waiting for plays to develop like it's 2010. And Clark? She's relegated to standing at the perimeter, watching the game instead of dictating it. The result is a team that doesn't just lose games, it loses momentum. Every run sputters, every spark is extinguished. And it's not because the players don't care, it's because the system won't let them breathe. Clark's natural tempo is being treated like a liability instead of a weapon. She's being asked to fit in rather than lead, and it's costing Indiana more than just a few buckets. Coaching is about adaptation, about putting your best player in the best position to succeed. But White seems intent on doing the opposite, trying to force a generational point guard into a system that actively suppresses her strengths. The comparison's been made before, and it still holds. You don't tell Steph Curry to slow down and play the corners. You don't hand Patrick Mahomes a check-down offense. So why are we watching Caitlin Clark, a player who is the offense set, reduced to a cog? And fans are noticing. They're not just mad about the losses, they're mad about how the team is losing. Double-digit leads vanish not because of talent deficits, but because of tempo changes. Indiana goes up by playing Clark ball, then collapses by reverting to White ball. It's a roller coaster driven by one decision, whether to trust your star or contain her. The consequence of this containment is becoming impossible to ignore. Morale is low. Chemistry is shaky. And Clark, the player who should be setting the tone, is instead being asked to echo one that doesn't suit her. It's not just a tactical failure, it's a philosophical one. The Fever aren't losing because Clark can't lead. They're losing because coaching won't let her. And if that doesn't change soon, the losses will keep stacking, not just in the standings, but in the stands, in the locker room, and eventually in the heart of the very player they were supposed to build around. This isn't just about offensive schemes or blown leads anymore. This is about trust, specifically, the trust of the one person who gave Indiana Fever a future worth watching. Caitlin Clark was never supposed to be a puzzle piece in someone else's vision. She was the vision. She brought the viewership. She sold the jerseys. She filled the arenas. She was the heartbeat of the rebuild. And now, that heartbeat is growing faint, not because she's failed the system, but because the system is failing her. Let's be clear, this isn't a slump, this isn't growing pains. This is a franchise mismanaging its greatest asset. They promised her the keys to the car and then locked the steering wheel. They sold fans a revolution and delivered a rerun. And Clark, despite being a once-in-a-generation player, is now forced to watch her potential shrink behind rigid playbooks and tone-deaf coaching. She's not out of sync with the team is out of sync with her. Caitlin Clark didn't come to Indiana to be told to wait her turn. She came to lead. She came to change the game. But how long can a superstar tolerate being misused before she looks elsewhere? How long before she realizes that her talent, marketability, and leadership deserve a franchise that won't just use her but trust her? Because here's the real danger. If Indiana doesn't change course, they won't just lose games. They'll lose Caitlin Clark. And with her will go the ticket spikes, the sold-out arenas, the national media attention, and the rare moment where the WNBA had a true cultural crossover star. Sponsors won't keep writing checks for a franchise that turns gold into rust. Fans won't stay loyal to a system that buries the player they came to see. And Clark? She doesn't have to stay. She has options. She has endorsements. She has the talent to reshape another team or another league if she decides Indiana isn't the place that values her the way she deserves. This league has been begging for mainstream relevance, and Clark delivered it on a silver platter. But relevance isn't owed. It has to be maintained. It has to be nurtured. And right now, Indiana's not nurturing anything except frustration. So here's the warning shot. If the Fever want to keep the future they lucked into, they better start building around it, not boxing it in. Because if they keep silencing the star they were supposed to spotlight, they won't just lose a player. They'll lose everything. Stephanie White's system isn't just outdated, it's destructive. The Indiana Fever drafted a generational talent in Caitlin Clark, sold fans on a new era, and are now watching her fade into the background. Her joy is dimming, her instincts restrained, and her leadership muted. The offense isn't evolving, it's eroding her identity. The question is no longer about wins and losses, it's about survival. Will the franchise evolve and empower the player who changed everything? Or will they cling to a broken system and force Clark to seek a future elsewhere? Because one truth remains: she was never the problem, she is the future.